The heart of London beats in time to the hopes of the free world. Its pavements echo with the footsteps of many nations. But today the London streets lead to the world of tomorrow. And the feet that pass in Piccadilly will one day walk free again in their own countries. Even the Cockney news seller lives in a page of history as she stands out from a backcloth of the free press of all Europe. And her customers buy newspapers in their own languages. But though they speak many tongues, these people have gathered here for one purpose. Their work, in many forms, is winning back the freedom of those they left behind. But when the day's work is over, where are they going? How can they pretend that London is Prague, or Brussels, or Warsaw? Where can they really feel at home? In Britain, the people of each European nation now have their own national club, founded with the help of their British hosts. One of these is the Czechoslovak Institute in London, and the boy going round a scout exhibition is a medical student from Prague. When the war is over, he will return to his own country as a fully qualified doctor. The library at the Institute, with its rare copies of Czechoslovak books, is used by hundreds who had to leave their own treasures in enslaved Europe. Those who like music come to hear their country's famous concert artists. There are lectures, meetings, and national displays. And American soldiers of Czech origin come to watch the Sokol. This is a vast gymnastic movement in Czechoslovakia, and ever since it was founded in 1862, it has symbolized the discipline and unity of the Czechoslovak nation. Today, the Czechoslovak forces in Britain march into battle under the Sokol flag, and their Sokol sections have more than 1,000 members who give displays all over Britain.
Raz, dwa, trzy, cztery.
So, as they applaud the Sokol, these people are applauding the vigor and achievement of a nation that is fighting at their side. Yugoslavs in Britain have their national meeting place in the Yugoslav House in London. The Yugoslav girl who bought her country's newspaper at Mars newsstand in Piccadilly goes there for the annual ceremony of St. Sava. St. Sava is the patron saint of schools. Throughout Yugoslavia, his commemoration is a day for prize giving and school celebrations, and people go to a special service and ceremony in his honor. Now St. Sava's Day is kept in London in the old way and is attended by King Peter of Yugoslavia. After the blessing of the holy cake, he and his ministers take part in the breaking of the bread, while the people stand in reverent and silent homage to St. Sava, praying for his guardianship over those other Yugoslav children still in their home country. Following the service, there are speeches and recitations. And finally, a special wheaten dish called the zita is blessed and handed round, first to the king and then to all the people. This ritual ends the ceremony. And after the king and his ministers have gone, and one more Sava's Day has renewed their faith in tomorrow, the people mix and talk and meet their friends on this day that brings them all together. In Belgrave Square, at the Belgian Institute, Belgians have their own club in Britain's capital, a club that was founded through the collaboration of the Belgian and British governments. And like other national houses in Britain, it is also a centre for spare time education and all kind of cultural activities, and incidentally, a very agreeable place to wait for a friend. Upstairs, Belgian officers on leave are having a lecture on their own colonies to fit themselves for the future. There are classes like this one several times a week, and civilians too have many classes and lectures at the Institute, as well as concerts, dances and exhibitions that take place there. After the class, the officers go downstairs to meet their friends in the restaurant, where meals are served as much like those in their own country as present conditions allow, and where numbers of British people come to tea with their Belgian allies. Down in the kitchen underneath the restaurant, a famous Belgian chef expresses his artistic bent as a pastry cook with the few and uninspiring ingredients of wartime. And he evolves all these delectable things from the same ration supplies that every housewife in Britain carries home in her shopping bag. This afternoon, when they have finished tea, the officers are going upstairs to join the people who are watching the famous Belgian marionettes. For the same marionettes who once toured peacetime Europe are now giving pleasure to children and grown-ups all over wartime England. Meanwhile, in another part of London, a father in the Norwegian Navy goes to the British-Norwegian Institute to fetch his small boy home from school.
Ja, det är rätt. Kan du läsa lite om det? Läs det.
Juksefiske i Østfinnmark i stad på Østhavet. Enda var 70 april og snøkav som en foss nedover fjellsida overfor Honningsvåg.
Andrej, kan du läsa lite om det?
Av og til kan en geist drivende over Hannaå. Der lå minst 600 motorbåter og kjøpefartøy og brukte i kjettinger og tau.
Ja, det är nog.
Long after school is over for the day, the grown-up life at the Norwegian house goes on. Tonight, the Norwegian Youth Association are holding their annual party with their flag and the picture of their king as the emblem of all their ideals. They sing of the mountains and valleys of their beloved country. And as they sing, they look forward to the day when those same mountains will once more echo their voices in a free Norway. Let us see how the national houses grew up through the collaboration of the British and Allied governments. A conversation between Sir Malcolm Robertson, chairman of the British Council, and the Dutch Minister for Education laid the foundation of Netherlands House. The idea developed at a meeting of representatives of the British and Netherlands governments in London, including the British ambassador to the Netherlands, Sir Neville Bland. One of the most dignified homes in London stood empty after being rocked in the Blitz, and this was the house chosen to become the home and meeting place of the Dutch in Britain. Sailors on leave helped to bring the empty house back to life, and furniture from a luxury liner went to Netherlands House until the day when all ships sail again on peaceful waters. In this war, more than ever before, we depend on ships and the men who sail them. Many of those who come ashore in Britain are setting foot in a strange country, for they belong to one or other of the United Nations. Any Allied seaman who finds himself in Liverpool, for instance, with time on his hands while he's waiting for his ship, can go to the Allied Centre, where he will meet other Allied seamen from all over the world, and where he will find much to pass the time. The centre is like a big, friendly, international club, and the games room is always crowded with men who want to relax after the strain of long watches and ordeals at sea. Many who come to the centre have come straight from the rescue ships after being torpedoed, and many have not seen their homes for years, or the ports of their own countries, and they are completely out of touch with the people they miss. These are the men who come to the shores of Britain and find a welcome in Liverpool's Allied Centre. If they are seeking rest, each country has its own comfortable lounge, with books in their own language. The rooms are all decorated in character with the country they represent, and anybody who wants somewhere quiet to read or sit and think or write his letter can find it in his nation's lounge. Sometimes the rooms are also used by Anglo-Allied discussions on subjects of mutual interest. The subject may be anything from economics to sport, for the centre is a great mixing ground for ideas as well as people, and many seize the opportunity to give and take in knowledge as well as international friendship. The canteen sees an ever-changing pageant of seamen from all round the globe, while the group sitting daily at the long table are Polish architects from Liverpool University. People argue and talk freely in the canteen, or read letters that have been waiting for them at the centre till they come ashore. Soon these Polish architects will take their degrees in Britain, for they took up their studies again from the point where they were interrupted by war in Poland. And now they are studying civic design, ready to rebuild Poland after the war. When they go back, no time will have been lost, and Poland will rise again. Outdoor as well as indoor life is organized from the centre, and scratch teams from different nations play each other in football matches. In the evening, all Allied seamen ashore in this port are welcome to the regular dances at the centre, and there for a brief while they can forget yesterday's dangers at sea before they meet the perils of the next trip. The people of Greece have their own club in Grosvenor Square, where the Greek house draws them together when they come on leave. There, besides English music, they can listen to the music of Greece. For among her fighting men are Greek musicians who keep their country's image before them in the beauty of a national song. So the soldier sings of a lone pine tree, deeply rooted in the soil of ancient Greece, to a people whose faith and hopes are rooted in that soil. The Polish sailor, at the end of a long journey from a northern port, will find a welcome at the Polish hearth in London, where he can recapture some of his memories of Poland while he's on leave. The chief centre of Polish life is at this national club, where morning finds Polish soldiers learning English. They learn it by a special phonetic system of their own, which has proved the quickest way of picking up the language and grasping the right pronunciation. The classes are always full of men eager to learn, for unfortunately few people in Britain speak Polish. However, at the Polish Hearth, this is being rapidly altered, and the Polish lessons for English people are just as popular, and some of them seem able to speak well enough for ordinary conversation. At the Airmen's Evening, which is a regular event at the Polish Hearth, the evening begins with a supper of Polish dishes and ends with dancing and music. And while the dance is on, the stirring music of the Kujawiak, Poland's national dance, brings even the stragglers back to their feet and draws them in. Poland's national music is kept alive at the Polish Hearth, just as the music of the other nations plays on at the different national houses. So they go home, refreshed by their own people's culture and traditional customs. And in Britain, they are free to keep them alive. For the muted strings of Europe sing clearly under the London moonlight, and voices chant the eternal songs of peace.